official numbers until all stay with us all night long for those results.
It's been a heated campaign between incumbent Democrat John Bel Edwards and his Republican challenger, businessman Eddie Rispone, so heated that the race has come to tonight's runoff. Now, during Election Day last month, Governor Edwards came out with a 46.6% of that vote, but that was not enough. A candidate needs more than half of the vote to win that seat.
Yeah, and we have teams at both candidates' headquarters tonight in Baton Rouge. Sheba Turk and Eric Paulson are at the Renaissance Hotel with Governor Edwards, and Danny Monteverde and Paul Murphy are at the L'Auberge Casino with Eddie Rispone. We are also on location for big races in St. Tammany Parish tonight.
We'll check in on all of them in a minute, but first, right now, we're turning to our political analysts right here in studio. They'll be watching these races very closely, pointing out important information we need to know regarding tonight's outcome. Let's send things over to Karen Swinche. She's in studio with Eyewitness News political analyst Clancy Dubose and Ron Fauché, and Karen, we are waiting for some pretty big results tonight.
We certainly are, and as you mentioned, those polls just closed. People who are in line get to vote at this point, but really we're going to start getting some numbers pretty quickly. And let's talk about, it's all about the turnout. It was 46% in the primary. What are you hearing? What are you expecting for tonight?
I'm expecting it to be at or above 50% statewide.
Same thing?
Yeah, I think that'll be the test. And if it is over 50, that's over a 10% increase over what it was 4 years ago. So that would be a much higher turnout.
What are you hearing in terms of Orleans Parish? John Bel Edwards spent a lot of time here. He chose to campaign again today, really try to get out the vote today. What are you hearing in terms of turnout here?
I'm hearing that in New Orleans, which had a pretty bad turnout, pretty low turnout in the primary, today it was excellent. There was a lot of turnout, black and white voters citywide. Of course, there was a lot on the ballot besides the governor's race, which is in and of itself is a reason for a lot of people to vote. But we had 4 ballot propositions, including 2 taxes. That would definitely drive turnout.
And really, you've got not only Louisianians looking at this race, but the nation, much like they did Kentucky a few weeks ago. Let's talk about what's on the line.
Well, people are looking at President Trump, and anytime President Trump touches an election, he gets participation up, he solidifies his vote, and he solidifies the opposition. We saw that in Kentucky. We will see that here to some extent. And if the Republican wins the governorship, that'll be a victory for Trump. If John Bel Edwards wins, it'll be interpreted as a loss for Trump nationally.
All right, we'll talk a lot more about the president's impact on this race coming up. Thank you both for joining us today. We're going to turn it back to Katie and Sharice now.
All right, Karen, thanks so much. Back to our political analyst in just a second. But for right now, let's get back to our live coverage in Baton Rouge on the governor's race. We have Sheba Turk and Eric Paulson at the incumbent Democrat John Bel Edwards event. Paul Murphy and Danny Monteverde are at Republican Eddie Rispone's event.
And we want to start tonight with the incumbent, Eric and Sheba, at the Edwards campaign party. What's the mood like there tonight, Eric and Sheba?
Well, it's kind of the same way it was the last time we were here. There's an LSU football game on behind us, and it's kind of a party atmosphere till the results start coming in. Now, John Bel Edwards has spent the past couple of days in New Orleans campaigning there very heavily. He says it's very important to his re-election efforts. And one of the things he did today, he does a favorite, he goes to lunch at Mandina's.
Yeah, he's been all over New Orleans for the past 2 days. He went to a barbershop out in New Orleans East. He also went to a women's luncheon. He visited Zulu headquarters, and as you said, it really seemed his focus, especially on this voting day, was on New Orleans.
Yeah, and one of the things he really is concentrating on is the African-American vote. He knows he needs a large African-American vote and a good bit of the white vote to win a re-election. The numbers right now are pretty close. He said he feels good today, but he is a little nervous.
Sure, we have to remember his numbers were great in the primary, but the focus here is on where will those who are supporting Ralph Abraham go? Will they turn to Rispone, who of course Ralph Abraham endorsed, or will those voters turn to Governor Edwards?
The other thing is, how much of a factor was Donald Trump's visit to New Orleans to Bossier City on Thursday?
And his third visit to Louisiana.
His third visit, yeah. All right, speaking of the Rispone campaign, let's get over there to Paul Murphy and Danny Monteverde.
And Eric and Sheba, good evening from Southwest Baton Rouge at the L'Auberge Casino and Hotel. This is where Eddie Rispone's election night party is, and his supporters just minutes ago started filing into the hall. The food lines have opened, Danny, so the party is just getting started.
It is, and this is a night that Eddie Rispone says he's confident about. We spoke to him yesterday. He was doing sort of a modern-day whistle-stop tour. He went all across the state: Shreveport, Monroe, Lake Charles, Alexandria, Monroe, New Orleans, Baton Rouge, and was able to talk to a lot of supporters yesterday and said that he's comfortable with how the numbers are right now, even if they are kind of neck and neck.
And today, I'm told that Eddie Rispone spent most of the day at his campaign headquarters here in Baton Rouge, rallying the troops, making phone calls, making sure to get the vote out for today. He also spent some time attending Mass at his home church, St. George Catholic Church here in Baton Rouge. And we are told that Mr. Rispone has now taken up temporary residence here at the L'Auberge Hotel, where he will watch the vote be counted with his election team.
Yeah, and the supporters out here, they're getting wrapped up outside in the hallway before they let him in. It was people waving the signs, putting stickers on each other. So they're out here and they're in full force tonight, and they're hoping for a victory tonight.
They even tried to put a sticker on you, honestly.
They did. Yes.
How'd that go over?
We can't do that.
And we were told, and I asked how the candidate was doing tonight, and I got a quote: excited, upbeat, and positive at the end of this hard-fought campaign. So we'll toss it back to you in New Orleans in the studio from Baton.
All right, thanks so much, Paul and Danny. We're going to be checking back in with them a lot tonight as those results start to come in. We are starting to get those early numbers. We want to check in with Greg Rigamer, who is, of course, one of the best election analysts in the state, and he is with us tonight.
Yeah, he joins us live from his office on the lakefront. And Greg, what are you seeing tonight, and what are some of the key factors you'll be watching for?
Well, thanks for the kind words, but let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to be looking for. I have been tracking this race since October 21st. We've done thousands of live interviews throughout the state. And what we're doing is trying to understand where the candidates stack up against each other. So when we look at results tonight, one of the things we know is what is predisposition relative to how the candidates are faring. And then we look at turnout to see if, in fact, what we know about the preferences are going to be borne out by the way the votes are cast. So what we have behind me is a tracking chart that starts off on October 21st. Rispone is red, John Bel Edwards is blue. And what we see as we get closer to the last track, which was Thursday night, November 14th, John Bel Edwards was at about 52%, and Rispone was at about 45%, with about 3% undecided. Now, obviously, there's no undecided vote today, but our tracking would indicate that John Bel Edwards has a little bit of an edge. So one of the things that we're going to be looking at very closely tonight is how the early vote by parish goes, because early vote was 3,000 votes cast by all 64 parishes. Flip the page. And what we know with this, we know how white, African American, as well as other race individuals feel about it. We know how the Republicans, Democrats, and other parties have expressed interest in the candidates. So with early voting, we know how many people of each class voted. So we're going to look at those early voting numbers and see how they compare to this to see if it verifies. And if it does, it's going to give us a very strong leg up in forecasting how the race will go.
And Greg, when are we going to know that? When are you going to be able to crunch those numbers?
When I get them.
So you're still waiting on them? And when do they normally come in?
Obviously.
Yeah.
Well, the early vote comes in first, okay? Mm-hmm. And so we have a routine set up that we'll be able to collect all of the early vote by parish. So think about it. I'm really excited that we have a few thousand live interviews. We'll have 503,000 results with no undecided. So as soon as those come in, we'll start getting a very strong indication as to what the race is going to look like as we progress through the night.
Okay, and what specifically, is there a specific area that you're going to be looking for in the state? I mean, Orleans Parish, we talked about with Clancy and Ron about how important that vote is for Governor Edwards tonight. Any other places that we're really going to be zeroing in on?
Well, Orleans is incredibly important to the governor, but we know how that's going to turn out. The governor got 87% of all of the votes cast in Orleans Parish. What we saw from tracking turnout throughout the day today is that the vote in Orleans Parish will be up significantly. In October, the early vote was around 30,000. In November, for this election, it's like 41,000. So really, Orleans is very important, but we know how it's going to turn out.
Okay, Greg, thanks so much. And of course, we're going to check it back in with you again a lot throughout the night as we start to get more of those numbers.
All right, and speaking of the numbers right now, take a look at your screen. We've been following the numbers so far, 1% reporting, and Eddie Rispone right now 57% in the lead, and incumbent Democrat Governor John Bel Edwards is trailing with 43%, but again, this is only 1% of precincts reporting. Let's go over to Karen Swinson and our political analyst.
If we look at the primary, and you had at the end of the primary Eddie Rispone with 27.5%, Abraham with 24%. You add those up, and it would have looked like on the night of the primary there was an inherent advantage for the governor. And yet we're looking at these tracking polls. Speak to the way in which each campaign executed their campaign and their message. And is this surprising?
No, it's not surprising, and I think Ron would agree with me. You have to point out that every election is a unique event, including a primary from a runoff. They're two completely separate elections. They're related because you have similar, in this case, the same candidates running down the two, but you cannot automatically assume that every Abraham voter will vote for Rispone, because some of them will, many of them will, most of them will. Some will not vote at all. Some might vote for Edwards. And then you'll have a whole wave of maybe 100,000 or 200,000 people who didn't even vote in the primary will show up. These are what Rigamer calls the presidential voters, people who tend to vote only once every 4 years in the presidential elections, which are historically the biggest turnout, not only in Louisiana, but nationwide. So you can't draw too much from what happened in the primary. You can make some basic assumptions, but you cannot just assume, for example, that because the two Republicans got about 51% of the vote, that Eddie Rispone will get that in the runoff. For example, 4 years ago, the three Republicans got 60% of the vote, and yet John Bel Edwards, the Democrat, got 56% against David Vitter. So it goes to show that every election really is a different event.
And I'm being told real quick, let's just go to some early numbers in the Secretary of State race. We've got Kyle Ardoin, the incumbent, with 68%. Of course, this is just 1% reporting.
This is early voting.
This is early voting. And this is a rematch, though.
What's happening is, yes, it is, from the special election a year or two ago when Ardoin ran, I think it was last year, and Gwen Collins Greenup made the runoff against him, and it was a similar result. What we're seeing is mostly rural parishes which don't have a lot of voters and not a lot on the ballot. They're loading, as all parishes are expected to do, they're loading their early votes in. Now, we have not seen the early votes from the big urban centers. We don't have early voting results yet from Orleans, Jefferson, St. Tammany, East Baton Rouge, or Caddo, which is Shreveport, nor the other big cities, Alexandria, Lake Charles, and Monroe. So that's where the big early vote's going to come in, and when it's going to come in, we'll see these numbers perhaps move around a little bit.
When you see a higher early voting now, does that necessarily mean there's more interest, or are people getting used to the convenience of it? I'm wondering what we can really read into it.
Well, both. I think there are more people who like the idea of voting early. It's convenient, it's easier for a lot of people, but it also gives you almost like a poll, a sample of the whole state. And one of the things that's interesting about tonight is we'll have an opportunity to compare those numbers at the end of tonight and see whether the early voting was representative of the state as a whole.
And speaking of early voting, I'm just looking at results that have just been loaded in from Jefferson Parish. John Bel Edwards, in the early voting alone, got 60% of the vote in Jefferson Parish.
Traditionally
That's a
very
really
conservative
strong vote for him. He got 51% 4 years ago against David Vitter. He got 53% in the primary. So this means he not only got the 90% plus among African American voters, but he also got a very strong vote among white voters, which are mostly Republican in Jefferson Parish as well. This is the kind of vote he needs out of Jefferson Parish to win this election.
Let's shift gears and look at one of the more contentious races. State Supreme Court, Will Crane, 58%, Hans Liljeburg, 42%, just 1% reporting, but really such a nasty race.
It was, and you know, sometimes Supreme Court races really get nasty because they have philosophical opponents that interest groups support, one for a specific reason and the other for a specific reason that's oftentimes diametrically opposed. We've seen it before around the state. A lot of money went into these campaigns, and it was almost uniformly negative. So it's the kind of thing you see every now and then because the Supreme Court makes a lot of very important decisions in this state. And once you're elected for a while.
And speaking of Supreme Court, I'm looking at the early voting results from Jefferson Parish, where Hans Liljeburg is from, and St. Tammany, where Will Crane is from. Liljeburg led Crane in Jefferson Parish by about 4,000 or 5,000 votes, but in St. Tammany alone, Crane is up by 9,000 votes. And this is very much a North Shore versus South Shore race, in addition to a proxy war between LABI, the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, and the trial lawyers. So we'll see how this race plays out as all the results come in.
All right, we're so fortunate to have you join us this evening. We're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back.
In Washington, he's beating
Mic check, 1 2 1 2. We're here at the current St. Tammany Parish president.
Welcome back to our Campaign 2019 coverage. We are following some major races of the North Shore tonight in St. Tammany Parish as well.
Yeah, lots of interest up there. Huge races. Voters cast ballots for their choice of parish president and for St. Tammany Parish Sheriff. Let's take a look at the numbers that have come in so far. If you want to take a look at your screen, Randy Smith is up by 54% to Tim Lentz 46%, and those are just the early votes from St. Tammany Parish so far. Of course, Randy Smith is the incumbent sheriff in St. Tammany. And now we want to take a look at parish president. If we want to switch over to the board that we can see from St. Tammany Parish there, the early votes, Mike Cooper, who is challenging incumbent Pat Brister, ahead with a substantial lead with those early votes, 61% to 39%.
And Pat Brister, St. Tammany's two-term parish president, forced into a runoff for the first time in her political career. Really? Wow. So this is a big race.
Certainly is. And our Megan Key is actually at Brister's campaign headquarters tonight. She's going to be following that parish president's race closely. Megan, what's the mood like there, especially with these early voting numbers that we're seeing?
Hey, people are pretty happy here. We're actually outside current St. Tammany Parish President Pat Brister's campaign party. You'll actually notice some of her supporters up there on the balcony. Now, we know that Brister has done a great deal of work in the parish, serving as president for the last 2 terms. During her 8 years in office, Brister focused on infrastructure, drainage, and roads. Under her administration, the parish bought an old mental hospital when it went up for sale. They've kept it running, but plan to put even more of an emphasis on mental health if she's elected for her 3rd and final term. Her competitor, Mike Cooper, served as the Covington mayor for the last 8 years. Now, Cooper was born and raised in Covington and wants to continue to serve the people of the parish. During the primaries, Cooper had a 7% lead in the race. If he's elected, he plans to focus on traffic, transportation, taxes, and transparency and trust. Now, we spoke with both candidates earlier who shared a bit of their personal lives with us.
I'm a mother. I'm a grandmother. My husband passed away 2 years ago. We had a wonderful, wonderful life together. He was one of my biggest supporters. He was my biggest supporter. I'm a cancer survivor. That was a hard battle, but I learned things about myself. But I served 4 years at the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. That to me was the biggest learning experience, obviously. You know, you kind of live in a bubble when we live here and things are as wonderful as they are in St. Tammany Parish. But you just have to realize that we are so fortunate to live here.
I am a lifelong resident of St. Tammany. I have a lifetime of commitment to our parish. And I grew up here and went to grade school here, graduated from St. Paul's in Covington, and worked my way through college, earning a degree from the USL with a major in city and regional planning. I'm involved with my wife, Catherine, in many nonprofit organizations and causes, and we want to continue to do that. We're very committed to our communities.
Well, the polls are closed now, and really right now it's a waiting game as those votes are tallied up. Of course, Eyewitness News will be providing you updates throughout the night, so stay with us. And the next time you see me, I'll be at Mike Cooper's campaign party, so stay tuned for that as well. Reporting live in Covington, Megan Key, Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Megan. And as she said, we, of course, are going to follow those 2 St. Tammany races closely, and, of course, the race for governor.
All right, we'll be right back.
Welcome back to our campaign 2019 coverage. We are now 24 minutes past the end of the voting period here in the state of Louisiana. Let's take a look at the boards for governor. At this point with 1%, you've got Eddie Rispone with 55%, John Bel Edwards 45%, but we're joined by our political analysts, Clancy Dubose and Ron Fauché, who are taking a micro look at the results parish by parish, and it's really interesting what you're finding in Jefferson and St. Tammany.
Yes, in the old days, which would be like 4 years ago, you would expect the vote in St. Tammany Parish and Jefferson Parish combined, which are both typically very Republican, to offset the big Democratic vote in Orleans Parish. What we're seeing now, just in the early votes, now this is not all the other votes that have been cast today, but the votes that were cast through last Saturday, St. Tammany and Jefferson cancel each other out. John Bel Edwards carried Jefferson Parish with 60% of the vote in the early vote, about a 7,000 vote lead. In St. Tammany, Eddie Rispone carried it 41 to 59. 59 for Rispone, 41 for Edwards, but it's a 7,000 vote lead. So instead of the old days where Jefferson and St. Tammany would both vote the same way and offset what happened in Orleans, Jefferson voted the way more or less that Orleans would, not quite the margin, but it voted for Edwards by a 7,000 vote margin, and that offsets the lead that Rispone had in St. Tammany. Now that's just the early votes. We have yet to see the votes that were cast today, which is much more votes. But we also know that Edwards is going to get close to 90%, between 85 and 90% of the vote in Orleans Parish. And as Ron pointed out in the primary, Edwards' vote, his base, has shifted to southeast Louisiana. And with him getting over 40% in St. Tammany, that's a big hurdle for him. Doesn't mean he's going to win, but that's one of the benchmarks that he was hoping to hit, 40% or more. And he's getting 60% of the early vote in Jefferson. We don't know if that's going to hold up when the votes come in from today, but it's one of the things we're going to be looking at. But we do know what's going to happen in Orleans. It's a big vote, and Edwards is going to come out of Orleans Parish today, Ron, I would say with a 110,000 vote margin or more.
Right, he could. And, you know, the big thing, too, is to wait and see what the turnout in Orleans looks like. Orleans was 7 points lower than the state turnout. State turnout was 46 and it was 39. So
that's in the primary.
That was in the primary. So if Orleans is at least equal to the state, that's a big help for Edwards.
And what are you hearing about the turnout
I'm
in
hearing
Orleans?
that the turnout in Orleans was very good today, very robust, as
That's
they're
what
saying.
we were hearing
Kinda,
earlier.
I don't know if it's exactly what it was the rest of the state,
But we don't know
much
yet.
closer than it was.
Yeah, if
But
it's the same as the state.
They're talking about at
Yeah,
4
right.
o'clock. A lot can
Right.
happen between 4 and 8.
Sure.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, with the numbers we're getting from the very early numbers, the only early numbers from Jefferson Parish and St. Tammany, you could look at those and infer that this could be a good night for John Bel Edwards.
Just based on the early vote. It means
Just
the early
based-
vote was
right.
good for John Bel Edwards. Today's a whole other day, and this is when probably somewhere north of 70% of the votes that are going to be cast in this election were cast today.
And just remember that when you're looking at your screen now, these are overall numbers. This is not broken down by parish, and at this point with just 1% reporting, you've got Eddie Rispone on top by 10%. So, and we're going to go over to the Edwards camp. I understand you have a former senator with you.
Yes, Karen, former Senator John Breaux is with us. He knows a little bit something about politics, and this race has become not just a Louisiana race, it's become a national race.
It's absolutely a national race. You think about it, President Trump has come down to Louisiana 3 times for public rallies in all parts of the state. And if he should lose his race because John Bel Edwards wins, that's a significant statement about the effectiveness of President Trump and having any kind of coattail effects.
Or the non-effectiveness.
Or non-effectiveness. If he loses, that's a significant statement nationally as well as here in Louisiana.
And while he was here, he called Governor John Bel Edwards pro-abortion, radical left, things that are just completely untrue about the governor.
Yeah, it didn't work. I mean, John Bel, by any measure, is a moderate, middle-of-the-road Democrat, like I tried to be when I was in the Senate. You can't make him a far-left liberal, which the president tried to do. And people in Louisiana are much smarter than that. We like to understand our politicians locally and not someone from Washington telling us who we should vote for.
And we've had some ugly gubernatorial races over the years, but this one was different.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, I think most of the races now nationally become very, very ugly, become very personally. Even if it's not accurate statements about your opponent, they make them anyway. And I think that tends to backfire. And I think in this race, it is backfiring. The president's statements about John Bell were way over the top. And I think people in Louisiana said, wait, we know John Bell Edwards. He's one of us.
Well, and he did get a lot of things done with the Republican legislature.
Yeah, I mean, anything he passed in Louisiana was done with bipartisanship, with Republicans as well as Democrats working together. He has a Republican legislature. He didn't get any of this done without bipartisanship and help from Republicans.
Sure, and Governor John Bell Edwards spent his day in New Orleans really pulling for votes there. Do you think that's going to be effective?
Yeah, I think in the first primary, the low turnout in many areas, particularly the greater New Orleans area, was very significant. I think what you see tonight is that the numbers in Louisiana and New Orleans area are much better than they were before. That's going to help John Bell Edwards significantly.
And how are you feeling about tonight? What do you think the outcome will be?
I'm excited.
I mean, I know what you hope.
I'm excited about it. I think that you can have a moderate, middle-of-the-road Democrat that can win statewide in a deep southern state. That's a significant statement, not just for Louisiana, but it's a statement for the whole country.
All right. Former Senator John Bro.
Thank you.
Good seeing you, John.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you for speaking with us tonight. All right, now we want to take a look back at the governor's race. Tan Trung has a look at that.
As much as John Bell Edwards wanted to run on his record as governor, the Democratic incumbent also wanted to remind voters of the record of former Republican Governor Bobby Jindal.
The fact of the matter is we had a $2 billion budget deficit when I walked in office. That was what was left to me by Bobby Jindal. Those deficits are in the past. We now run 3 consecutive surpluses.
The Edwards campaign had high hopes it could win outright in the primary, but the GOP clearly had him marked for takedown, since he's the only Democratic governor in the Deep South. They sent their heavyweights, President Trump, the vice president, and even the president's son. Instead of a victory speech, Edwards had to push for even more support to hold off a surging Eddie Rispone.
But it only takes one person putting Washington-style politics over the people of Louisiana to reverse everything that we have worked so hard together to accomplish. And my fellow Louisianans, we are not going back.
In the weeks following the primary, his campaign had in heavy rotation ads reminding voters of Edwards' military service, his pro-gun stance, and his family ties to law enforcement. Credentials that traditionally voters have received well in the red state of Louisiana.
They know that I am very much in the middle of the political spectrum. I am a moderate. I am pro-gun. As you know, I am pro-life. And I'm a good fit for the state of Louisiana.
How good a fit will be up to the voters. His opponents have labeled him a radical liberal. Perhaps a more radical notion is a Democrat up against the weight of President Trump winning a second term in a conservative state. Tan Trung, Eyewitness News.
And it was interesting because we had both Rispone and Governor Edwards on the morning news.
Yeah, you spoke with
and
both
you
of
could
them.
see the differences between the two candidates. Governor Edwards seemed a lot more issue-driven, and Rispone seemed a lot more, I'm a Republican, I'm going to change the state, but not really specifics.
Yeah, he's kind of run from day one saying that he was a Trump supporter, and that's kind of what he was running on as a platform. And he didn't deny that when he came to the studio.
No, he did not. All right, let's go over to the Rispone campaign headquarters. And Danny Monteverde, I'm Paul Murphy.
Yeah, and we are here at the Eddie Rispone campaign headquarters, the L'Auberge Casino in southwest Baton Rouge. We're here joined now by Ray Garofalo, state representative from St. Bernard Parish. We've heard some cheering tonight, but that's really so far just been for the LSU game on the TV. Ray, how are you feeling tonight, though?
Awesome. What more could you ask for, Danny? We have LSU football, we're winning big, and we have a Rispone campaign, and we're going to win big.
I know last time we talked, you were crunching the numbers all night. It's still really early. How confident are you? It's razor thin so far going into this.
We knew going in that it was going to be close. We knew that the polls were showing that we were neck and neck all the way across the board, and that it was going to all depend on turnout. The numbers I'm seeing on turnout look good. So they got more people out. The Democrats got more people out. We got more people out. So I'm feeling very confident at this point. Right now it's 56-44, and that's with 1% reporting out. So it's early.
Ray, over at the John Bell Edwards party, former Senator John Bro was talking about the Trump effect, and Mr. Trump, the president, has been to Louisiana 3 times, stumping for Republican candidates, twice in as many weeks for Eddie Rispone. Would you agree that that maybe cuts both ways? It may attract some voters, but it may deflect others.
It could cut both ways. I mean, we know Louisiana is a red state. We have a lot of conservatives in Louisiana who are really pumped up by Mr. Trump. And we're hoping that his coming down twice is going to get our vote out. We knew that we were going to have to get our vote out, and that was one of our secret weapons. And it's not too much of a secret that the president draws people out to the polls. We're hoping that that had the effect that it was intended to have, and that we get a lot of people out to vote Republican.
In recent weeks, Eddie Rispone has spent a lot of time in north and central Louisiana, not quite as much in the New Orleans area. Is that because he expects to do better in those areas than he does in the New Orleans area?
I think it was mainly because we were hearing from a lot of different areas in the Northeast and Northwest, primarily Northwest, that a lot of Abraham voters were on the fence because they were so entrenched. They really wanted to vote for Congressman Abraham, who's a great guy. You and I talked. I know we talked about that during the primary, but they were not necessarily coming over warmly to Mr. Rispone. So the thought was that if the president went out, if Congressman Abraham went out and told the voters, absolutely, we're with Mr. Rispone, we want you to come out and vote for him, and the president in particular pushing for him, we'd get the voters out. And that was the job. That was his job, and I think he's done a good job with it.
And so who is Eddie Rispone? Well, Ton Trun takes a look.
Win or lose, Eddie Rispone's campaign is wedded to President Trump and his Make America Great Again movement. Just a few weeks ago, after earning a spot in the runoff, Rispone thanked the president before thanking God or his family.
He's going to make us great like the rest of the country, and he's going to support us. That's wonderful. Let's thank him.
Rispone would continue to thank the president as he headlined 2 Rispone rallies in the run-up to tonight. The Rispone campaign took many pages from the Trump playbook. A businessman and a self-proclaimed outsider, Rispone played up the fact that he doesn't have experience in politics. Clear parallels to the 2016 Trump campaign. Much like the president, Rispone blames what he calls radical liberals for problems in the country and Louisiana. Of course, in Rispone's view, the chief radical liberal in the state is John Bel Edwards.
Do you think John Bel Edwards is a radical liberal?
Of course he is.
Well, what is your definition of a radical liberal?
That wants to grow government. Government is the answer to everything, and raising taxes is the answer to that. And that's what the liberals do.
Keep in mind what Governor Edwards has done in his first 4 years was with a Republican-controlled legislature. And that factors heavily into why the president and the GOP are so involved in their push for Rispone. Edwards is the lone Democratic governor in the Deep South. Rispone and the Republicans say that needs to change.
It's happening all over the country, really, where business people finally just say enough is enough. We need to turn our state around. And they've run and been successful. I think the citizens are looking at it different now. They're ready for someone that's not a career politician.
Rispone defeated a sitting congressman in the primary. Now he's targeting a sitting governor. He may despise career politicians, but if he succeeds, his career in politics will begin. Ton Trun, Eyewitness News.
And so again, Eddie Rispone looking for his first elected position tonight, hoping to become the next governor of Louisiana. And there are several hundred people in the ballroom here tonight at the L'Auberge Casino. We are starting to see some big names in the state Republican Party come in. John Young was here just a few minutes ago, we saw. And again, the crowd just continues to grow tonight here. Kind of a subdued atmosphere right now, but presumably as the night goes on and the numbers come in, we're going to see things start to change.
You know, and every once in a while we'll hear some cheers, not necessarily because people are seeing the early numbers, but because the LSU game is on.
They're seeing those numbers.
And they're seeing the 44-23 beatdown of Ole Miss. So at least that's something to cheer about here.
That is.
But as for the crowd itself, I see a lot of cautious optimism. There are a lot of folks in the room here that are somewhat optimistic given the early numbers, which of course will change throughout the evening. And Eddie Rispone is here at the L'Auberge Hotel with his team watching the vote be counted.
And we'll bring you the latest from here as we get it. Back to you guys in New Orleans.
Okay, thanks so much, Danny and Paul. Of course, we're going to get back with them in just a little bit. And the early numbers that are in so far, we have about 8% of precincts reporting at this hour. Eddie Rispone still in the lead. over John Bel Edwards, 54% to 46%. So I think the big question for our analysts in a few minutes that we're going to ask is where are those votes coming in from and what do they mean? But we want to check on some other statewide races before we do that.
Yeah, Secretary of State right now, Carl Ardoin is still leading 65%, and Gwen Collins Greenup trailing behind with 35%. That is with 7% of precincts reporting.
Next, let's check on that very contentious Supreme Court race. Will Crane is leading Hans Liljeburg 58 to 42%, 12% of precincts reporting in that race. Crane, of course, from St. Tammany Parish, where there are other major races at stake tonight. Hans Liljeburg from Jefferson Parish. So that's how they stand in that race so far tonight.
All right, and of course, we're going to continue to follow the JP Council race as well. Let's get an update on those numbers. Dino Bonanno is 54% leading right now. Michael O'Brien with 46%, 13% of precincts reporting in that race.
And we have another JP Council district on the ballot tonight as well. JP Council District 3. Byron Lee is very narrowly leading Derek Shepard, just one vote, with 12% of precincts reporting at this point. That's 5 of 43 precincts, so I imagine those numbers are going to change significantly as the rest of them come in, but that is really shocking to see Byron Lee leading Derek Shepard by just one vote. And we want to check in with Greg Rigamer, who, of course, is the man with the numbers tonight. One of our 3 men with the numbers, I should say. But let's check in with Greg and see how things are looking with the governor's race. You know, we're seeing 8% so far reporting, Greg?
Well, I'll tell you what's really interesting in the numbers at this particular point is that Orleans isn't in and East Baton Rouge Parish isn't in. These are 2 very strongholds for John Bel Edwards. I just got a report on the early vote for Orleans Parish, and Edwards has 90% of that vote. So we had about 41,000 votes cast in Orleans Parish, and Edwards is between 35 and 36,000 of those votes. So Orleans alone closes the gap on the variance in early voting, and we don't have Baton Rouge yet, you know, on this. And so what's interesting, we talked about this in October, but we run this model looking at the votes that are in place right now and projecting what it's going to look like by the end of the night. Right now, our model has it absolutely 50-50, but neither East Baton Rouge nor Orleans Parish is accounted for. Neither parish is accounted for. So it's pretty interesting, and it's going to be an exciting night.
That is really tight at this point. Obviously, 50-50 is as close as you can get. Greg?
But once again, you don't have East Baton Rouge or Orleans Parish yet.
Yes.
Okay, these are the numbers that we have. They're on your screen right now. 11%, 13% rather, just changed. The most recent numbers you can see right there. Eddie Rispone still in the lead, 53 to 47%. You're seeing those come in as well, Greg?
I apologize, I missed that. What was that, Katie?
53% for Eddie Rispone right now, 47% for John Bel Edwards. But again, we're still missing those 2 key parishes.
Absolutely. I mean, we have a very little election day voting in, but early voting is so significant, but we don't have any early voting in this calculation from those parishes.
Okay, so that's the big difference there. What else are you going to be watching?
That's the big difference.
What else are you going to be watching throughout the night as you're seeing those numbers come in? I mean, once we get that real big slug of votes from those 2 key parishes, can we draw any conclusions, do you think, or we have to wait a little while?
I think you might want to wait a little while because there isn't much election day voting in, and we do know, obviously, President Trump was in this week after the close of early voting. But there are a few things that we will look at to determine how much of an effect that really could have. But I think with the completion of early voting, that will tell us a lot.
All right now, Greg, it is up to 16% reporting, 53% still in the lead for Eddie Rispone, and 47% for John Bel Edwards. I know that it's still very early, but should there be some sort of optimism over at the Rispone camp right now?
Oh, look, it's always better to be ahead, irrespective of, it's better to be ahead at the end of the day, but it's also good to be ahead at the beginning of the night, So, but it's just a little bit too early. I'm sure that any victory is greatly celebrated, so I'm sure the Rispone camp is very happy, but I think the Edwards camp will be a little bit relieved when the votes from Orleans and East Baton Rouge start trickling in.
Yeah, you know, Greg, I know President Trump was watching the returns during the primary very closely. I imagine he's watching these tonight as well, given that this really is a reflection of him. As you just mentioned, he was in after the close of early voting. So that really is kind of a wild card here.
It is. And so that's one of the reasons that Election Day voting will be so interesting.
Okay, Greg Brigamer, as always, we appreciate your analysis, and we'll come back to you in just a little bit. In the meantime, we want to go to break. We'll be right back. We are, of course, bringing you live election results as they're coming in tonight. A hot race for Louisiana governor tonight. If you want to take a look, this is what we have so far. 19% of precincts reporting Eddie Rispone, the Republican in the race, challenging the incumbent Democrat John Bel Edwards. Rispone's ahead, 53 to 47% of the vote. But there are some key parishes, according to Greg Brigamer, that we do not have their early votes yet. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, right, Sharice?
I know, we're standing by waiting for East Baton Rouge, of course, and for Orleans Parish as well. So, of course, he said that he checked the early voting numbers for Orleans Parish, and it was 90% for John Bel Edwards. So, of course, following along with that race, Kyle Ardoin still leading, 65% for Secretary of State. That's 17% of precincts reporting. Of course, that's over Gwen Collins Greenup, who's 35% trailing behind. I mean, honestly, this race, Kyle came out swinging kind of at the top of this.
Absolutely. And he's, of course, the incumbent in this race. It is interesting to look at the party affiliations there and see what's happening with the governor's race and see how much or how little that will play tonight.
Yes.
So that's just one of the many races that we're watching.
All right. Right now, we're continuing again to follow along with your election coverage. Again, Secretary of State, actually, we're going to send things over to Karen Swinson right now with our political analyst. They're taking a look at the Secretary of State race as well.
We sure are. In 48 minutes after the polls close, we are ready to call this race. Clancy?
Kyle Ardoin is going to be reelected Secretary of State handily, and this is very much a Trump-Clinton type race, Democrat-Republican. It follows the traditional path with even bigger result because Donald Trump got 58%. We're also calling the St. Tammany Parish President race. Mike Cooper is going to be the new parish president. He led in the primary by a significant margin. Right now he's leading with 61%, and I'm told Brister was polling under 40% in the runoff. So the incumbent Pat Brister in St. Tammany has been defeated in her quest for a third term by Covington Mayor Mike Cooper.
That is huge news for St. Tammany. So if you are just joining us now, your parish president has been unseated. And let's talk a little bit about that. Is this a referendum on Pat Brister, or was it really a referendum on proposed tax hikes in St. Tammany?
A little bit of both, because she was associated so much. She tried 3 times to get a sales tax passed, arguing that it was needed. The voters said, no, thank you. And then when cuts were made, the people who were affected by the cuts got angry, and that's what you see. And that adds up to over 60% of the vote. And by all accounts, she was a good parish president, but St. Tammany is a very staunchly anti-tax parish, and Pat Brister has paid a price for that. She's a Republican, by the way, and so is her challenger.
Right, I was just going to say, two Republicans facing off against each other. Mike Cooper, the former mayor of Covington, so no stranger to politics, especially on the North Shore.
No stranger to politics, and he, based on the performance in the primary, this looked like it was going to be a tough fight for the incumbent.
Let's go back and talk about the governor's race, because you, Ron, have been crunching some numbers, taking a look at the race by race, and what have you determined?
Yeah, well, one thing I found here is that there are 30 African-American precincts that have reported so far, over 95% African-American. And at this stage of the game, Edwards is getting 99% of the African-American vote.
Have you ever seen that happen before?
Well, that's about as high as anybody can get.
We've seen it in a few precincts here and there, but not across a state, 30 precincts.
And it's been consistent all night.
Wow.
So not only are we going to have to, we don't have to look at the percentage of African-American votes anymore. We know he's maxed out. But now it's just a matter of turnout.
So getting back to turnout, and we heard from Greg, if we looked at those numbers 50-50, but they didn't include Orleans, and they didn't include East Baton Rouge, and they didn't include Caddo with Shreveport.
Caddo and Shreveport are now in. Edwards carried it in the early votes. It was not a lot. It was about 12,000 votes cast. He got, I think, 59 to 41%. He carried it, by a comfortable margin, but it was not like Orleans where you had 41,000 votes cast.
Gotcha.
You had about 12 or 13,000 votes cast there.
Because we really have to wait for those parishes to get their numbers in. In the meantime, let's turn it over to Megan Key, and you are standing there by Mike Cooper's campaign. I'm sure they are elated by the news that we have just called it in his favor for the next parish president of St. Tammany.
Yeah, a lot of exciting news tonight here, and definitely Mike Cooper, former Covington mayor. According to WWL projections, he is the new St. Tammany Parish president. And as you can tell from the music and the noise, people here at Bogafilaya Hall in Covington are jamming right now. And you'll notice on the television screen, they've also had the LSU game on today as well. Just a hall full of supporters, a lot of energy here. People saying that they knew that Cooper was going to win. There are residents that live in St. Tammany and Covington who have just seen his leadership skills over the years, over the last 8 years, and wanted to vote for him, thinking that he would be perfect to be the next St. Tammany Parish president. Now, we know that Cooper was born and raised in Covington and wants to continue to serve the people of the parish. Now that he's elected, he plans on, based on our projections, if he's elected, he plans to focus on traffic, transportation, taxes, transparency, and trust. And as you can tell, it's just a large crowd here. It looks like family, supporters, friends, and just people out here having a great time cheering on Mike Cooper. And again, from our WWL projections, it looks like he will be the next St. Tammany Parish president, so a lot of energy here. Of course, stay with Eyewitness News for the latest. Reporting live in Covington, Megan Key, Eyewitness News.
All right, Megan, thank you very much. Let's take a look at some of the other races. We talked about the parish president race in St. Tammany. Now let's take a look at the sheriff's race there. Randy Smith up about 10% with 14% reporting. Let's take a look at new numbers in the governor's race. These are just coming in now. We are waiting to see them as you are. 51% Eddie Risponi. The gap is narrowing. John Bell Edwards 49%, 30% of the precincts reporting.
And that is without any results from Orleans Parish, where we expect the governor to get close to 90% of the vote and a very large turnout in New Orleans today.
So this almost,
voting.
in the last 5 minutes, this just closed the gap considerably,
yes.
obviously.
And what that represents is East Baton Rouge coming in.
Rouge, yeah.
Okay.
East Baton Rouge came in and brought it from 54 to 51 for Risponi. If Orleans numbers were in this, just the early vote alone, Edwards would be ahead by about 20,000 votes.
Interesting. All right, so we're going to continue to monitor that race. You're seeing, as we are getting those numbers, so are you. Let us take a look at the Supreme Court race. Just such nasty ads in this race. Will Crane up 58%, Hans Liljeburg 42%. So
I'm getting close to being ready to call this because Crane is romping on the North Shore, and in fact, I'm going to go ahead and do it. We're going to call this for Will Crane. He's going to win this race.
All right,
this is a North Shore, South Shore race, which is exactly what people thought it would be. It kind of shaped up as a proxy war between business interests and trial lawyers, but I think the geopolitical issue in this was the North Shore wanted to have its person on the Supreme Court. The North Shore electorate is 61% of the registered voters in that Supreme Court district.
Talk about some of the ads in that. I mean, he launched some really tough ads against Lil Jaberg. Then you had sheriffs coming out in support of Lil Jaberg saying that wasn't true. I mean, negative ads are
negative ads. It was kind of like the governor's race. She had negative ads on both sides, and including outside PACs weighing in on that as well. It was almost a microcosm, at least not in terms of the result, but in terms of the ads and the strategies employed by getting lots of money put in by outside forces who had an interest in that race.
Well, Will Crane won that very handily. Let's take a look at some of these state Senate races. We've got Joe Bowie and John Bagneris vying for Senate District 3. And this is an interesting race, I think, because they're such good friends. They go back to Suno days.
Yes, and they both served as members of the Orleans delegation of the House of Representatives. So each of them gave up a seat to run for this Senate seat, which became available because J.P. Morrell, a state senator from New Orleans and one of the real leaders in the state Senate, not just in New Orleans, but statewide, was forced to retire because of term limits. I'm looking at the parish-by-parish results. Bowie is leading. This Senate district touches, a lot of it is Orleans Parish. There's pieces of St. Bernard Parish and pieces of Jefferson Parish. Bowie is leading in all three parishes, but I'd like to see more results before we call that race. But certainly Bowie was a favorite going in.
All right, let's shift gears to the North Shore for St. Tammany and Tangipahoa. That district is Senate District 3. You've got State Representative Reed Falconer trying to is taking on Patrick McMath, the Covington City Councilman at large.
This is a seat that is vacated because of term limits. Jack Donahue, an incumbent state senator, staunch Republican, forced out by term limits, so it creates an opening. Reed Falconer is not term limited, but he chose to try to step up. And he was attacked in the late stages. Now, 26 of 95 precincts, we don't know where these are coming from, so it's too early to project that, but it looks like a close race and a very hard-fought race.
Let's go back and take a look at the governor's race, our latest numbers and what they're showing. If we can pull up the governor's race there, we've got Eddie Rispone with 51% over John Bel Edwards, 49%. Again, we have said this repeatedly, that gap is closing. Let's turn it over now to Greg Rigamer, who joins us now live at UNO. You're crunching some numbers on your end.
We're crunching them as aggressively as we can, but one of the really interesting things in here is that Orleans will close the gap and actually put John Bel ahead of Rispone on the early vote. They're just a couple of parishes out, so I think we're very close to being able to get a real firm feel of how this race is breaking out. As we can see, the gap is closing right now, and so I think the next few minutes, over the next half hour, it's going to be very interesting and we'll be able to say. But in Orleans Parish, like I said earlier, 41,000 votes being cast. John Bel Edwards got 36,000. So, and those are not in the system yet.
Okay.
And when you add those votes, Greg, it would put Edwards ahead by around 51 or 52%, I think, in the early voting. Would that be correct?
It would be. There are a couple of other small parishes out, so we have to get those into the mix. But the really significant number is obviously in Orleans Parish.
And you are expecting those numbers to come in really in the next 10, 15, 20 minutes?
I would hope so. I mean, they're out, but they're not in the system as of this point. But, we just,
obviously we can't control, parishes, and we can't control when they come in. They come in when they come in. The rule is that parish clerks of court, as soon as they can, they load the early votes. And of course, what we're calling the early vote is not just the early votes that voters cast live on a computer when you show up at the courthouse or at the various precincts. It also includes the mail-in ballots and the absentee ballots. And those have to be counted by hand because those are paper ballots. They got to be scanned in, and if there's a discrepancy, as happened in St. Tammany when there was a computer glitch, you got to go count them by hand, and that can slow down the process.
Let's get Greg's opinion on something that Ron was talking about, the African-American support for John Bel Edwards. Ron, do you want to sum that up again?
Yeah, the early precincts from around the state indicate that Governor Edwards is getting about 99% of the African-American vote, which is just about unanimous.
Right, Greg?
Yeah, it's very interesting. In the tracking that we did on this, 90% of the African-American vote was decided. 10% said they were undecided in the survey, but of the 90% who said they were decided, 89% were for John Bel Edwards, 1% for Eddie Rispone. So obviously, we knew that 10% undecided was not really undecided. It's simply people who prefer not to tell someone else who they're voting for. So the fact that he's getting 99% of the vote does not come as a surprise. We have built into the forecasting models 97.5% of the African American vote in Orleans for John Bell, and I think that's realistic.
All right, thank you very much, Greg. We appreciate your insight. And it is now 9 o'clock. The polls closed an hour ago. The margin between the governor... Oh, look at this. All right, we've got 45%. John Bell Edwards takes the lead, 51% to Eddie Rispone's 49%. Again, these numbers are very fluid. They are coming in very rapidly now. And this is something we predict. You predicted as the numbers would come in from Orleans Parish. I believe are we going to Edwards' campaign? All right, let's go over to the Edwards campaign with Eric and Sheba, and I understand there you are, a familiar face with Councilman Jason Williams.
Yeah, we are joined by Councilman Jason Williams, and when we told him the numbers that you guys just told us, it put a smile on your face.
It put a big smile on my face. This is so important to the people and to the city of New Orleans. When you look at what this governor did to make sure that the airport could open up on time, you look what the governor did in terms of giving our teachers the first pay raise they've seen in decades, healthcare expansion. This governor has been a friend to the city of New Orleans. And pushing for a sewage and water board member. He stepped up for sewage and water board at a time when other people were turning back for political reasons. I like the sound behind. I think the race was over.
Yeah, this is the crowd responding to these new numbers. And of course, Governor Edwards focused his efforts on New Orleans yesterday. You think that worked?
Oh, absolutely. Look, we knew after the primary that New Orleans was going to be the key because a lot of people didn't show up at the polls. They thought he had it run because of he brought us from a deficit to a surplus. So a lot of people in New Orleans thought who would go backwards. So people showed up in big numbers early voting in Jefferson Parish and Orleans Parish, and judging by what I'm hearing behind me, I think it's looking pretty good.
Although it is still surprising that an incumbent governor could get so close in an election to a virtual unknown 3 or 4 months ago.
Well, I'm pretty shocked about what's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. So a lot of crazy stuff is happening in the world right now, and I think some of it spilled over into our state. But it looks like sound minds have prevailed so far.
All right, Councilman, thank you for coming. It's good to be
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, we'll catch up with you later on. All right, we're actually going to check out Rispone's campaign.
All right, and we are here at the LaBarge Hotel in Southwest Baton Rouge with Sharon Hewitt, the state senator from St. Tammany Parish, to talk a little bit about the Rispone race and also what's happening over on the North Shore, where Pat Brister has served 2 terms and now she'll be replaced by Michael Cooper. What are some of your thoughts?
Well, Pat's done a great job for our parish, and it's been a very difficult race. Running against Mike Cooper. They're both great candidates, and so we're very thankful for the work that Pat's done. We're very excited about the opportunity to work with Mayor Cooper.
And what do you think turned that race towards Mike Cooper?
Well, sometimes you're faced with some challenges, and we had some challenges in our parish where the parish president and parish council proposed some tax increases that were not very well received by the voters, and I think that was probably one of the biggest factors in the race.
In terms of the governor's election, it's all about turnout tonight. We were saying off camera just a few minutes ago, this is such a razor-thin margin right now. So what is some of the turnout you were seeing today in St. Tammany Parish? You were saying it was a lot of people.
Yeah, we heard there were lines out the door that we may be exceeding the 2016 numbers in St. Tammany. I know the Rispone campaign and other groups did some very targeted get out the vote work in St. Tammany because we know that St. Tammany is a very important parish in any statewide election. And so right now we're excited about the results that we've been hearing about so far, and we hope that tips the scales in the favor of our candidate, Mr. Rispone.
And of course, John Bell Edwards did okay in St. Tammany during the primary, didn't he?
He did. To be honest, his numbers were a little bit surprising to me. I think he had about 38% in St. Tammany. But we split the vote, of course, between two Republican candidates. And so we know that now that we have one Republican candidate, we've seen a great rally around Mr. Rispone. And we feel very confident about how we're going to do in our parish tonight.
Now 51-49, what are you thinking?
Well, it may be a long night. You know, we know that it matters which parishes have reported and which ones haven't. I don't believe Orleans has reported yet, and so of course that'll probably tip in the favor of Edwards. But we feel very good. There's been a lot of work done around the state in support of Mr. Rispone, and so we think that things are going to work out in our favor.
Thank you very much, State Senator Sharon Hewitt from St. Tammany Parish. And we'll toss it back down to New Orleans to Katie and Charisse.
All right, thanks so much. And that really is interesting analysis. We were just talking about the results in St. Tammany Parish and about the Trump effect there, and the fact that Rispone spent a lot of his time trying to really rally those conservative voters on the North Shore.
Yeah.
Apparently, John Bell Edwards in St. Tammany, as of now, is leading Eddie Rispone, even in St. Tammany Parish.
Yeah, 50% to 49%, if I'm not mistaken, with the last numbers that we were just talking about. Now, there are several races that we're following outside of the governor's race. Obviously, this one is a very tight, as Katie mentioned, a horse race here.
Sure.
They're kind of neck and neck right now. But let's talk about a couple of other races. We have State Representative District 91, 36% reporting, and Mandy Landry, a Democrat, at 52%, leading Robert McKnight with 48% of that vote.
Yeah, that's an interesting race as well. Do we have another one that we're going to check out? 94. There we go. This is a big one. Lots of get out the vote effort going on in Jefferson Parish and parts of Orleans where this district is. Stephanie Hilferty, 60%. And Tammy Savoie, 40%. And we want to possibly head over to Karen, who may be able to call some races. And this one in particular. Karen?
Yeah, let's go back to the St. Tammany Parish and let's take a look at the St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's race. Clancy, are you all right?
We're calling Randy Smith, the incumbent sheriff, getting reelected. With 31% reporting, we have enough of a sample of the precincts. Incumbent Sheriff Randy Smith, who led in the primary, unlike Parish President Pat Brister, he led with, I think, around 48% of the vote. So this is not a big surprise. He was pushed into a runoff, but the old rule of thumb is if an incumbent gets above 45, you know, he or she should have a decent chance, at least, like John Bell Edwards, of getting reelected. We don't know yet if Edwards has gotten reelected, but we are saying now that Randy Smith, the incumbent sheriff in St. Tammany Parish, will win re-election tonight.
And he had secured the endorsement and the support of the third person in the primary, and that was Nick Tranchina, so that certainly helped.
That certainly helped. We also want to make a call in House District 94, the one that was just up before this.
All right, let's pull that up.
A House district that straddles Orleans and Jefferson parishes along the lakefront and parts of Mid-City and Lakeview. Stephanie Hilferty will win re-election tonight. She's leading with about 60% of the vote now, with almost 60% of the votes in. She led in the primary. The person who ran third is also a Republican, like Hilferty, so that's not a big surprise. She's a first-term state representative, one of the kind of moderate Republicans up there, and in her district, she's quite popular, and she's getting about 60% of the vote right now. She's going to be reelected tonight.
And no Democrat had won that race, had won in that
about
place
40
in 40
years.
years. Yeah, so
That's
not
right.
a huge surprise there. All right, let's take a look at the updated numbers from the governor's race, if we can now. And we are going to be looking at those momentarily, and we've got
almost a tie. Look at that, 30 votes.
This is, I don't want to say it's fun. I know it's a nail-biter for everyone else, but
530 votes.
if you're into politics, this is fun. This is 400 votes, 500 votes separating them.
Now, this is with
60%
very few
in.
votes from Orleans Parish, where Edwards will win it by about 110,000 votes. So we'll see when those votes come in what it looks like. But and of course there are plenty of votes outside of Orleans where Rispone is going to lead. So I think we're still looking at a pretty close race when it's all said and done. We're not ready to call that one just yet.
All right, let's take a look at the District 97 race. Let's pull those numbers up, and this would be in the House there, Matthew Willard. Oh my goodness,
Kind of
another
a Gentilly-based district, and here you are, you're looking at a difference of 52 votes. Wow. As close as it gets.
This might be a long night for
Eugene Green is a well-known name, been around forever in politics. Matthew Willard has a well-known last name, but it's his first run for public office. These two guys really went at it, and that's one that we're going to be watching probably till another hour or so.
All right, let's take a look at State Representative from District 98. Amy Adato-Friedman versus Kia Sherman. Clancy, your thoughts on that?
That margin surprises me. I thought Friedman might have the edge, and I don't know if we can call it yet because I don't know where the votes are coming from, but that runoff was very hotly contested.
All right, and let's see, where do we want to go from here? Let's stay 99. We've got Candace Newell, and she was just shy of 50% in the primary.
Yeah,
so the fact that she is leading is no surprise.
Yeah, and again, 30% reporting. This is a district that was State Representative Jimmy Harris's old district for several years. He's now the new state senator, so that created an opening. Adonis Expose and Candace Newell, a close race with only 30% in. We can't call this one yet.
All right, let's take a look at District 105. You've got Leopold and Cormier.
This is mostly a Plaquemines Parish district with just a sliver of Orleans and a sliver of Jefferson on the West Bank. And Leopold, the incumbent, a two-term incumbent seeking re-election to a third and final term. Leopold, a Republican, Cormier, a Democrat. Cormier put some pretty significant, a PAC in favor of Cormier put some pretty significant attack ads on in the last week, and I think that narrowed that race. We don't know yet how that one's going to go.
We've been talking about how fluid these numbers are. Let's take one last look at the governor's race before we take a quick break. And with 63% of the votes in, but not, as I understand it, Orleans Parish. Look at that, just a couple hundred votes or several hundred votes separating them.
600 plus votes, 617 votes statewide. That's as narrow as it can get.
And you know, we are looking at this so closely. You know, the White House is looking at this so closely, and really political analysts around the country waiting to see what the implications will be of this race. 9:10 right now. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back.
Our campaign coverage tonight, lots of results coming in, and of course the governor's race is as tight as everyone expected it to be. Let's take a look at the latest numbers there on your screen. 68% of precincts reporting, so more than half, and look at that, 71%. Eddie Rispone with a narrow lead that got a little bit larger from the last time that we actually checked these numbers out. So
yes, I mean 71%, and of course this isn't with Orleans reporting, so of course we're continuing to follow with that. St. Tammany Parish President Mike Cooper, WWL has called the race for Mike Cooper. Right now he is on stage. Let's take you live right there from his campaign headquarters.
Family, I thank Catherine, my siblings, Eric, Paula, Teresa, Chris, and their families, my mom, who's not here this evening, but I can also thank my dad, Ernest J. Cooper. He served as mayor of this beautiful city for 24 years, and it was his service to this community that inspired me to run for mayor of Covington and serve for 8 years, and also inspired me to take the leap to serve the citizens of St. Tammany as parish president. So I want to thank my heavenly dad and my mom and my entire family, my cousins, the extended families that are here this evening and those that can't make it, Catherine's family, which is my family as well. We have a large family in St. Tammany Parish, which probably made up a lot of the vote. And we're thankful for that. I want to thank the City of Covington family that I served with for 8 years. Let's hear them.
You've been listening to Mike Cooper's victory speech over there in St. Tammany Parish. We're going to take a look at some other races we are ready to call. Let's take a look at the Jefferson Parish Council race, District 2. This was Paul Johnson's seat, who lost to Scott Walker in the at-large race. Dino Bonanno, you are projecting that, Clancy?
Yes, Bonanno's going to win that. He'd been leading all evening, and frankly, we got caught up in some other races. We should have forecasted this a little while ago, but Dino Bonanno has won that race.
Okay, clearly
Jefferson
pretty
Parish
handily.
Council, District 2. It's a little tighter in District 3, where Byron Lee is leading by just a couple hundred votes. So still too early to call that one. Very hotly contested race. He's up by about 300 plus votes, 370 votes there. Very, very closely contested. You got 13 precincts out. Won't know for sure until we get closer to 90%.
We'll keep
depending on the gap there.
Our eyes on that. Let's take a look at the latest governor's numbers, because these just keep, just look at this race. All right, 72%. Eddie Rispone still on top. Let's ask Greg Rigermer to join us in this conversation so that you can tell us where these votes are coming in from, and maybe just as importantly, where we haven't heard them come in from yet.
Sure. What you see on the screen is a precinct level map. So if the precinct is colored red or blue, we have a result from it. If the precinct is gray, that means we're awaiting results. What you can see, Orleans is not in. Very little vote in Orleans is in. Baton Rouge is largely out. Alexandria is out. Caddo is out. Bossier's pretty much in at this particular point. So our model is, when we look at the votes that are in and look at the votes that are out, it is 50-50. If you recall, in the primary, we had a pretty early indication that the governor was going to finish somewhere around 47%. That's what happened. Right now, when I look at the map, intuitively, I would think that the governor would have a bit of an advantage given the precincts that are out, but the model, looking at what's out and what's in, literally has it at 50%. So it could be a long night.
Looking at some updated numbers with 76%, and John Bell Edwards now takes the lead by just dozens of votes. But if I'm hearing you correctly, given the demographic makeup, Greg, of the parishes that are still primarily out, Orleans, Baton Rouge, Alexandria, Caddo, we could infer from that, given the demographic makeup, that those would be good for Edwards. Is that correct?
Well, some of them are good for Rispone, okay, but the big parishes are really good for Edwards. And so I think that's what we're really looking at. That being said, the model that we use to forecast these races has it really right on the margin at this particular point.
So it's a nail biter.
So we need a little bit more in it. It absolutely is a nail biter.
Okay. Ron, your thoughts on this at this point?
Well, surprise, surprise, This looked like it was going to be a close election. It is a close election. There's still some significant votes out with some parishes that vote heavily one way or another, so we don't know yet. But but we have to keep watching.
So break it down for us. So Orleans, primarily demographically, is probably going to go to JBE, right?
It's a massive margin.
Okay.
Right.
Baton Rouge, he said, was primarily out.
Yes, and depending upon what part of East Baton Rouge Parish,
Gotcha.
could be
Okay.
a big factor.
Alexandria?
Same thing.
It depends on where these are. Okay, this makes more sense now.
Versus the rest of Rapides Parish.
And then the same with Caddo. Okay, let's turn it over to Clancy. What are you taking a look at over there?
I'm looking at something similar to what Greg was showing us, but here, instead of breaking it down by precincts, we're just looking at parishes. And this tracks what we saw 4 years ago between Edwards and David Vitter, except there are fewer blue parishes. The red are for Rispone and the blue are for Edwards, red being Republican, blue being Democrat. What's not surprising to me and should not be surprising to anybody who follows politics is where these blue parishes are and where the red parishes are. Typically, where you follow the Mississippi River, you see blue parishes. St. Bernard, Orleans, up the river. And of course, Tangipahoa is where the governor is from. East Baton Rouge is where Rispone's from, but there's a large African-American voting population in East Baton Rouge. And Rapides, and up here in the northwest corner of the state, Caddo, which is Shreveport. Now, we've colored it blue because right now, based upon the precincts that are in from Caddo, Edwards is winning. There are still a lot of precincts out. This is just according to the returns that we have right now. I'm going to refresh it and see. Now we have 78% reporting, and Rispone is slightly ahead. Again, it goes back and forth. As Greg Rigemer said, his model has it right on the edge, 50-50. So every time we refresh it, we see a different result. It gets back and forth. So we're going to continue to look at this, but this is very much a typical Republican-Democrat map in Louisiana. Parishes along the Mississippi and the Red River tend to be Democrat. Everywhere else tends to be Republican. Let's go back to Karen.
All right, it seems like every time we look at those results, they just flip. So stay with us as we get those numbers. We are passing them on to you. It is going to be an interesting night, folks. We'll be right back.
Welcome back, everybody. Clancy Dubose is joining us here at the main set, and we have another race that we're ready to call.
Yes, the State Senate District 3, which is Orleans Parish plus pieces of St. Bernard and a little bit of the West Bank of Jefferson. We're calling this for State Representative Joe Bowie, who is defeating his fellow state representative and friend, John Bagneris. This is not a big surprise, but this is a fairly healthy margin for Bowie. It was a hard-fought race. He was always the favorite, but you never know until the race is run.
Yeah.
And it is being run now with 71% precincts out of 98 precincts reporting. Most of those that are out are in Orleans Parish. Bowie has led in all 3 parishes. St. Bernard Parish is all in. He narrowly won that. He's winning the West Bank of Jefferson with all but 2 precincts in. And now, looking at St. Tammany Sheriff, we've already projected Randy Smith, the incumbent sheriff, who is on stage speaking now.
Yeah, he is. We're going to go to him in just a second to hear what he has to say. So let's hear what Sheriff Randy Smith has to say about his win tonight.
I think we're violating the fire marshal's code, but that's all right. This is Slidell, home base. Thank you. We're at 60-something, over 60%, and that's what it's about. This is amazing. We're doing a great job. The men and women that are here tonight that work for us have shown we're doing a great job throughout this parish by keeping you safe, keeping our crime rate low, our response time high, and our assault rate the lowest it's ever been, and that's what we're going to continue to do based on the people who work here to St. Tammany Parish Sheriff's Office. Thank you. I love you. For the citizens of St. Tammany Parish and the majority of the voters who came out and voted, that's what's more important, because they have the trust and they know we're doing a good job and we're going to continue to do a good job. I want to give it up for Nick Tranchina and Nick's going places, folks. He's not finished yet. And I want to thank you very much for your endorsement and encouragement and your vote this time. My Deputy Chief Bohm and his lovely bride-to-be, they just got engaged. The sign waivers, the volunteers, the sign crew that put up the signs, took our opponent signs down. Thank you. We did it. We're grateful. But the most important person here tonight that I want to thank, besides you all, and I love each and every one of you, is my beautiful bride. She keeps me straight, folks. She keeps me in line, but she's also out there waving signs. You can see the redness on my face. Let's party.
All right. That is, Sheriff, we just heard the victory speech. That was from Randy Smith. Obviously, a lot of celebration that's happening there, but the big race, of course, a lot of us have been watching too, the St. Tammany Parish President race, where Mike Cooper was on stage a little bit earlier. He did his victory speech. Let's go out to Megan Key, who's live inside of the campaign headquarters for Cooper. Just kind of give us an idea of how it's feeling right now. What everyone obviously celebrating.
Oh yeah, everyone is celebrating here at Bogotá Hall. You know, screaming, clapping. Everyone is just really excited to hear that Mike Cooper is the next St. Tammany Parish president. He just gave his victory speech a few minutes ago. You all saw that live on air. And he's talking with us this morning. You can see there's a bunch of supporters here. And we're going to jump in on this interview.
For the support that they've given me. And I want to thank you very much. Thank everybody.
Push you over. I mean, it was a commanding lead.
I think the citizens of St. Tammany trust the job that I did for the city of Covington, trust my work ethic and how hard I've worked for the people of St. Tammany over my lifetime, and felt that it was the right time to elevate me to the next position.
And Mike, how does that feel to go from Covington mayor to now parish president?
It feels great. To me, it's a natural transition. I have a lifetime commitment to St. Tammany. I have that executive management experience here at the city of Covington and managing public works, recreation, police, fire, administration, and it's just taking that experience to the next level.
And during your victory speech, you said you're ready to just jump into it and get working.
Yes, I am ready to get working. That's my work ethic. I work all the time, and I look forward to a smooth transition. with Pat Brister and her administration so that I can take office in early January.
Does it feel surreal for you right now just to have everyone clapping? And I know it was a tough race, but just to make that transition?
I felt good about this race and the way the campaign has been moving, particularly over the last several weeks. And I'm again very thankful and grateful to the citizens of St. Tammany. I look forward to working with the mayors, city council of all the municipalities, new parish council, and moving our parish forward and addressing the pressing needs that we have.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mike, for talking with us, and congratulations again. We're coming live from Gubernatorial Hall, where you can see a very happy Mike Cooper and his supporters this afternoon. Stay with Eyewitness News as we continue to follow the rest of the elections. Reporting live in Covington, Megan Ciazza.
Okay, Megan, thank you so much. Of course, Mike Cooper winning by a large margin over Pat Brister. One of the areas that we've been really closely watching tonight is Orleans Parish, and we're wondering what's happening with the results coming in there, because I think that's one of the big variables in the governor's race. So let's look at the numbers that we have right now, and we can put up a full screen there to show you what we're looking at in the governor's race. Right now, we're looking at Eddie Rispone winning by 50%, Governor Edwards 50%, just a few thousand votes separating the two right now. And so this is something that really has been bouncing back and forth throughout the night as those results come in. We're waiting on some of those key parishes, including Orleans.
Yeah, some of Orleans Parish votes are coming in, and of course all of the parishes have not turned in that are largely Democratic, of course, and a lot of people said that as soon as Orleans Parish gets all of their votes in, it's going to put Edwards over. This is according to our political analysts. We'll see if this still is going to play out this way, though.
I mean, there are some Republican strongholds that are not in as well. So I think the question is, what is our turnout going to look like, and what's going to happen in this race? We're keeping a very close eye on it for you as we continue throughout the night with our Campaign 2019 coverage. Welcome back to our Campaign 2019 coverage. One of the things that drove voters to the polls in Orleans Parish was the list of various tax proposals and things like that on the home rule charter change.
Four ballot propositions, two of which were taxes.
The ballot of yes, according to the mayor.
That's right.
All right, let's take a look at these.
We can project 3 out of 4, starting with the home rule charter amendment to establish a human rights commission. With 60% reporting, that's going to pass. It's overwhelming. And this was a big win for the mayor. Let's go to the next one, which is the which is the bond commission, $500 million in bonds for capital improvements. This is without a tax increase. It's got 65% so far. That is going to pass. The next one, which is a 3 mills property tax, we're not sure how that one's going yet. It's pretty close, failing right now with 54% against. It's tough to pass a tax, but with 40% of the precincts out and the mayor having frankly a good night so far, I don't want to rule that one out yet. So that one we're still going to put a question mark on. And if we go to the last one, which is a tax on short-term rentals, that one is passing handily. That one is a tax, but it's going to be paid by tourists, not locals, and it's passing pretty significantly. So we're going to call that one as being passed.
Let's take another look at the governor's race. We say if you blink, they're going to flip, and they just did. So here we have 89% reporting. Look at that, 50.1% John Bel Edwards.
2,700 votes, not even, 2,600 and a few more votes.
This is entertaining tonight, and I'm sure it is a nail-biter if
I'm
you're
sure it's not entertaining for the candidates, but everybody else is entertaining.
So I said it's a nail-biter if you're in either camp. And could you please tell me again where we want to go? All right, let's go over to Eric and Sheba and the Edwards camp.
All right, thank you very much. And we're being joined by Councilwoman Helena Moreno. And we just got those numbers in with 89% of the vote in, 60.1% for Governor Edwards.
Yeah, I mean, we're really excited. I feel so much better now than I did 5 weeks ago. We knew that we had some work to do, and we from the
It's 50.1, I'm sorry, 50.1.
Yeah, I knew what you meant. I knew what you meant. But I think we're gonna be in good shape. I really do. We needed to create, a lot of a frenzy in the city of New Orleans, which I think we were able to do. And the numbers from New Orleans are going to be, in my opinion, what gets us to where we need to be.
From the governor's standpoint, do you think he did what he needed to do between the runoff, of course, the primary and the runoff, to get voters in his camp?
I'll tell you what I personally think happened. I think that so many people thought that, hey, John Bell's got it in the bag. I think he's going to be just fine. And they really didn't. They didn't really show up the way they needed to during the primary. But then obviously when he didn't make it all the way through in the primary, they knew they needed to step up. So immediately we just started reminding people on what would happen to the city of New Orleans in particular, if we lost John Bell and what that would mean to us. And sure enough, we saw that with early voting, and we saw it even today, that the people of New Orleans were getting out there and voting.
And we saw the importance that some numbers just came in. We saw the importance of New Orleans to Governor Edwards. He spent the last 2 days here.
Sure, but remember, he has proven that New Orleans is important to him throughout his term. This wasn't like he just showed up over the past few days and tried to tell the people of New Orleans that New Orleans meant something to him. He's proven it by what he's done with economic development. He's proven it by what he's done when it comes to the fair share deal. He's proven it when it comes to criminal justice reform. He's been present in the city of New Orleans since he began his first term, and I know that he's going to be present moving forward too.
All right, guys, well, as you can hear, thank you. Big crowd is going crazy here as we have more updates on the number. The screen right now saying with 91% of precincts reporting 50-50, and that's why the crowd's screaming.
Yeah. Let's go over to Responding Headquarters with Paul and Danny.
Eric, it's a pretty festive mood here at Responding, not only because this race is very, very close. LSU won a big game against Ole Miss just a few minutes ago, I guess. And we are standing here with Thad Responding, the oldest son of the candidate. And just what are some of your thoughts as you see the race be counted, the votes be counted?
I guess just first of all, we're so proud of Dad. Dad is an amazing man. He threw himself out there, and we couldn't be more proud of him. He's really ran a great race. It's really, really close right now, but we're behind him, and we know that God's in control.
And what was your reaction, the family's reaction, when he came to y'all and said, I think I'm going to do it, I think I'm going to run?
I guess that proverbial record kind of stops in your head. You're kind of like, Dad, what did you just say? What about a farm or vegetables or maybe some more deer hunting or grandkids? And he simply said, Thad, I think the state could do better. So I'm all in. And
of course, your father has been around politics for a good portion of his life, pretty much behind the scenes, donating to campaigns and causes. So I guess you always knew that he had somewhat of an itch to get more hands-on.
I don't know if I would say it's an itch. Dad said it before. He's a giver. He's not a taker. So he's always looking to see where he can help out. And when he saw that Louisiana was where it was for so many years, he just said, I'm going to try and find somebody that I think that could do it. And when he couldn't, he said, I'm in. I'm 100% in.
Have you spoken to him tonight since we're seeing these numbers come in? It's literally 50-50 right now. Have you spoken to him, and what's he saying?
It's so close, but I admire him so much. I asked him tonight, I said, Dad, how are you doing? And his answer was, we did what God asked us to do, and it's his will. He's in control. So he's an amazing man. He really is.
What are some of the things that your father and the war room are watching right now as the votes come in?
I guess they're looking at the big parishes just like anybody else, and what parishes would go towards his opponent and what parishes would go towards him. I haven't talked to him. I haven't actually talked to the consultants. I've just been kind of mingling around and kind of looking at the numbers as y'all have looked at them. But I would say that's what they're looking at.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thad Risponi, the oldest son of the candidate, Eddie Risponi. Thanks for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
And that is the scene here at Risponi's election night party here at the L'Auberge Hotel in Baton Rouge. Now back to y'all down in New Orleans.
Lots of optimism from both campaign headquarters tonight.
Yeah,
as this is so close.
I mean, you keep hearing cheers from both, and I mean, honestly, this is why you heard cheers over at the Edwards camp. 92% reporting, and John Bel Edwards now takes the lead with 50.4% of the vote. It's still tight here. Eddie Risponi with 49.6% of that vote right now. And again, 92% reporting. They have been sort of going back and forth with this all night. I feel like every time we tweet, the numbers change, and every time we refresh, we get new numbers in and new votes in.
Absolutely. It is the definition of a horse race.
Yes.
And we're, of course, going to keep you informed of every move. Stay with us for your latest campaign coverage. We'll be with you in just a minute.
All right, welcome back to our 2019 and campaign 2019 coverage. We have been following a very, very tight race for governor of Louisiana. Eddie Risponi and incumbent John Bel Edwards neck and neck.
Absolutely. Here are the latest numbers. 93% of precincts reporting, 50.4% for John Bel Edwards right now. That really has been bouncing back and forth all night. Our election analysts are crunching the numbers right now to see where we stand and where they think that we're going to stand at the end of the night. Of course, when they have a decision about a projection in this race, we'll be the first to bring it to you.
Well, I know that this is not only a Louisiana race. This has become a national race. Obviously,
Absolutely.
President Trump coming down to Louisiana, something for Eddie Risponi. He has come down multiple times. It was just down earlier this week. Right now, I'm just taking taking a look at my Twitter feed, and so far, a lot of national outlets are following along with this race, sort of in the same vein as they followed along with the Kentucky governor's race.
Absolutely. And last time during the primary, we actually saw President Trump chiming in once there was a decision and this was going to a runoff. So I anticipate that President Trump is going to be closely watching this throughout the night. And as soon as there is a clear winner, we will likely hear something from him on Twitter, as we usually do hear a lot from the president on Twitter.
Yeah, right now he has been following and talking about this race, and he's been really up close, focusing on North Louisiana. Of course, he was down in South Louisiana not too long ago. But again, right now, John Bel Edwards, 50.4%. And I think we're ready to call the governor's race. Let's send things over to Karen Swinson.
All right, this is exciting. Let's turn it over to Clancy and Ron. And Clancy is on the phone right now. What are we
I'm
doing?
on the phone with Greg Reagan. I'm waiting for him to give me the thumb up, but I think we're ready to call the governor's race for John Bel Edwards, because most of the precincts, not most, but a significant number of precincts that are out are heavily African American, and as Ron pointed out, John Bel Edwards is getting 99% of the African American vote. So with that, considering the precincts that are out, especially in Orleans Parish, East Baton Rouge, and Caddo, which is Orleans, Baton Rouge, and Shreveport, Greg, Ryan, and I say it's John Bel Edwards.
Can we please get, and this is wonderful news for their camp, but let's get Greg's thoughts too. Can we please get Greg to join us in UNO? And Greg, would you concur?
Oh, absolutely. I mentioned to Clancy, ready to call it. There are a couple of things that we really want to look at. First of all, look at the map. The very significant percentage of precincts are reporting. We have a lot of precincts that are predominantly African American that are still out. When we look at the vote that's out, the vote is more African American than it is white. The governor is running the table on the African American vote, okay? And he's doing reasonably well with the white vote for a Democratic candidate in Louisiana. So when we're looking at this, earlier tonight I mentioned that our forecast model was just 50-50, just ratcheted right at 50-50. Now we're at about 51-49 on this. And it's been consistent, and we're looking at this, and I think it's safe to call the race.
All right, we are calling the race for Governor John Bel Edwards. Let's go right over to the campaign with Eric and Sheba.
All right, this place broke into pandemonium when John Bel Edwards was projected the winner of tonight's race in a very close race.
Yes, there have been chants for more years, JBE. This crowd has just grown to a new level in the past few minutes.
It's a whole different atmosphere than when he won the primary election. We could hardly get away from the game. Tonight, it's all been about the numbers, and they've been watching this close race.
Sure, and even though the crowd seemed positive throughout the night, there was a lot of nervous energy, even talking to people when we first got here. That seems to have completely dissipated. The crowd is growing. Mayor LaToya Cantrell actually just arrived just a few moments ago, and we know Governor John Bel Edwards did some campaigning with her over the past couple of days.
Well, for the past 2 days, as you mentioned, he has been in New Orleans. He went heavy after the African-American vote.
Very much
so. He had a couple of women forums, and this crowd is still going crazy because there's been such anticipation in this room all night long.
That's right, and the crowd we know at this point is just waiting for Governor to come back out and address the crowd. There's just so much hype at this point.
All right, and as soon as the governor comes out, we will come back. We will come back here. Let's go over to the Rispone headquarters in Paul and Danny.
Well, Eric, for as much as it's a celebratory atmosphere over there, it got really quiet really fast over here. The TV behind me and Paul right here was showing one of the local stations, and when they called it for Governor John Bel Edwards, there were actually some boos that came up from the crowd.
And you still see some folks on their phone looking at the returns as they come in, almost in disbelief, hoping against hope that maybe the tide will turn at the last second. This is still a very close race. The race could be decided in the thousands of votes. So by no means has this candidate not done a good job tonight. He just may not get the most votes. And a lot of folks in here are still glued to the race results, whether they're getting it from their news apps or from the Secretary of State. I guess the mood is it's not over yet, even though we and others have called the race for John Bel Edwards.
Right. I mean, you look around the room right now, and the crowd behind us over here, behind the cameras, I mean, almost every eye is still up on the big TV over there. And I think to your point, Paul, just looking to see as those numbers come in if there's any chance that maybe it inches up again for Eddie Rispone. But again, complete difference here at the Rispone headquarters tonight as it is down the road at the Edwards campaign party.
And we can talk a little bit about this in terms of national politics, because Donald Trump, President Donald Trump, came down to Louisiana 3 times, twice in as many weeks, to campaign in support of the Republican candidate. He lost a close race in Kentucky. Looks like he will lose a close race here in Louisiana. So looking at national politics, what does that mean in terms of coattails, at least here in the South, for Donald Trump in Louisiana, and in terms of being able to turn out the vote and get the Republican candidate elected into the State House?
And I think tonight we're just seeing it didn't have the effect that they were hoping it would have. It was close, but obviously so far just not enough. So I think at this point we'll send it back down to New Orleans, I believe.
All right, Danny, thank you very much. And let's take a look at the very latest numbers. With 96% in, John Bel Edwards leading 50.7% to Eddie Rispone's 49.3%. They talked about the Trump impact just then, and I know earlier Danny and Paul had interviewed one of Rispone's officials, campaign officials, as calling the president their secret weapon. Did that weapon backfire?
Well, first of all, there's nothing secret about Donald Trump.
His words, not mine.
He was the obvious weapon, and it was a good choice for Republicans. Donald Trump is the best weapon. I think that's what he was really trying to say. Donald Trump is the best weapon that Republican candidates have, not in every state, but certainly in states like Louisiana. It just couldn't overcome the fact that John Bel Edwards, although he's a Democrat, is highly regarded even among enough Republicans to put him over the top. That was true 4 years ago, before Donald Trump burst onto the scene and became president. It is still true. It's by a closer margin, but it is still true that, and I think the message, the big takeaway from this election is not that this is a rebuke of Donald Trump. I don't think it is. I think it is simply Louisiana voters saying, by a narrow margin, we think the governor should be focused on Louisiana, not on national issues.
How about if we talk about Democrats in Louisiana? You know, JBE, the only Democratic governor in the Deep South, the only one here in statewide office in Louisiana. Does his win signal that perhaps conservative blue dog Democrats, middle of the road centrists, can make a comeback in the state?
Not yet. I think John Bel Edwards is not a one-off, but he's a very unique Democrat, and that's not grammatically correct. He's a one-of-a-kind Democrat because he has a military background with West Point and his Army Ranger career. He's pro-gun 100%, pro-life 100%. He's rural, but he's Catholic. He checks all the boxes. Right. If he were anywhere outside the Deep South, he'd be a runaway favorite Republican.
And yet you heard Senator Breaux saying that it harkens back to his era, at least in his opinion.
Breaux was like that, Linda Boggs was like that, but that's a bygone era. That's 15, 20, 30 years ago. Right,
we're
absolutely.
Up now to 97% of the precincts now in, and still John Bel Edwards with the lead. And obviously we've already called this race. We were talking about Twitter earlier, and while they were talking about various Twitter feeds, I looked at the president's feed, silent. The last time we tweeted about this was about 4 hours ago, asking people to get out the vote.
It's a little late to get out the vote now, but yeah, I think when it's all said and done, it's going to be close to 51% for Edwards. Maybe not quite there, but probably around 50.8, 50.9.
Right. And we are waiting to hear from the governor at his campaign headquarters. We will go there as soon as that starts. For right now, we're going to take a quick break.
Welcome back, everyone. Of course, we just recently, moments ago, called the race for Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards. Now we're just waiting to see when he's going to come out and speak, waiting to see if Eddie Rispone is going to concede, and what's going to happen as we watch history unfold tonight.
All right, right now, I'm taking a look at the Twitter feeds right now, and you're seeing not only celebration over at the Edwards camp over in Baton Rouge, but online, we said that this race has grown from a Louisiana race to a national race. And right now, you're taking a look right now over at the Edwards campaign headquarters, where people are starting to assemble on stage. Obviously, a lot of celebration there. We're told that Mayor LaToya Cantrell, also you see her there right in the front, joining the people that are right there on the stage. So right now, of course, probably in a matter of minutes, Governor John Bel Edwards is expected to take the stage, re-elected, the only Democratic governor in the Deep South right now. Obviously, a lot of people celebrating. We said that this has turned into a national race because President Trump stumping heavily for Eddie Rispone, and everyone turned this into basically Governor Edwards versus President Trump.
Right, and look at the numbers. They speak for themselves. 97% of precincts reporting Edwards with 50.8% of the vote. Such a tight race tonight. Eddie Rispone with 49.2%. And again, you're looking at the stage at the Edwards camp. Lots of people gathering. It's clear that he's going to come out in just the next few moments, and we, of course, will bring you that speech live as soon as he begins to make it. So history-making night tonight with Governor Edwards getting reelected, the only Democratic governor in the Deep South.
All right now, I think that we're going to go to a quick break, and when we get back, we'll hopefully hear from the governor when we return.
Ever since they had the projection come up on the screen, this place has been wild. I mean, they have reason to celebrate tonight. This is a big victory for Governor Edwards.
It is, and so close, really until the very end. Our backs were turned, but we knew when we were getting new updates because the crowd just went insane. They've been chanting 4 more years and JBE. Those have been the 2 big chants tonight. But just so much excitement. We are waiting for Governor John Bel Edwards to take the stage any minute now. A lot of elected officials here. Mayor LaToya Cantrell showed up just a few minutes ago.
A big contingency from New Orleans,
yes,
because New Orleans was very important to Governor Edwards, and Edwards has been very important for New Orleans. The city council people we've talked to say he has meant so much to the city, from the airport to the sewage and water board to many other projects.
Sure, and we saw that in the past 2 days. He really focused his efforts on New Orleans, visiting a barber shop out in New Orleans East. He did a women's luncheon, all these events in New Orleans. He even went over to Zulu headquarters.
Yeah, and we know he's getting close to coming out because the stage has been packed with supporters and elected officials and other folks. Senator Richmond is up there. It's a very big crowd here tonight, much bigger than the crowd we had during the primary.
Yeah, and it is certainly a big win for him. Of course, President Trump came to Louisiana 3 times throughout this election process, urging voters to vote Republican, and obviously it didn't work here.
And I heard Clancy say that this will be viewed by Louisianians as a vote, not a denunciation of Trump, but more of a looking at local issues, politics. This is Louisiana politics. But for the national media, they're going to jump on this and say this was a repudiation of Donald Trump.
Sure. So we will be continuing to watch what this race now means for Louisiana. You actually spoke with Governor Edwards just a few days ago and asked him what he was looking forward to working on in the state, and really said that he wanted to continue what he's been doing, working on education, pay raises for teachers, and early childhood education, and of course the economy.
And now we'll get the chance to. Let's go back to the studio.
All right, thanks so much, guys. We turn now to challenger Eddie Rispone's campaign event.
Yeah, Paul Murphy and Danny Monteverde are in Lake Charles at the L'Auberge Casino there. Eddie hasn't come out yet, and neither is Governor John Bel Edwards, but I imagine it is a different scene where you guys are tonight.
And I believe you guys are at Baton Rouge, right?
It is, in the sense that it got real quiet once the race was called for incumbent Democrat John Bel Edwards, but just a few moments ago we heard the chants, Eddie, 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 when it looked like he would be making his way to the stage. We're expecting that to happen any minute now. We did know that this was going to be a razor-thin race all along. We just didn't know which of the candidates would come on top. And I've been looking at this quote all night from our colleague Tyler Bridges at the newspaper, who wrote in one column, he said, will Louisiana voters elect a Democrat they mostly like, or will they turn to a candidate from the political party they prefer? Well, it looks like they went to the candidate that they kind of like.
That does look to be the case tonight, and we're seeing some of the crowd start to gather here right now. Again, we're waiting for Eddie Rispoне to come down. For as much as the atmosphere is different here as it is compared to the Edwards party, this is a group of people who are not giving up right now. The numbers obviously aren't going Eddie Rispone's way, but they're here, it looks like, for the long haul tonight, waiting to hear what Eddie Rispoне has to say, given the way these numbers are going.
And just talking to folks here in the hall all night long, there wasn't one person that we talked to that thought this was going to be a runaway for either one of the candidates. They all looked at the results with bated breath, cautious optimism, and just checking to see which way it would break tonight. It just apparently isn't breaking the Republicans' way this time.
Yeah, and it was interesting. Yesterday we spoke to Eddie Rispone out at the airport in Kenner, and I asked him, I made the point to him, I said, this is not a runaway for you or John Bel Edwards, and his response to me was, no kidding. So I think even for him, he was sort of surprised that the numbers just didn't, even yesterday, appear to be going in his favor.
And just a little while ago we were speaking with Thad Rispoне, Eddie Rispone's oldest son, and asked him a little bit about the race, and it was sort of interesting how it came about. And he said that his father basically says that whatever happens is God's will. He is a deeply religious man, as most folks know. In fact, he went to Mass today at St. George's Catholic Church, his home parish, and spent some time there. And he basically left it in the hands that this is God's will, and he's willing to accept whatever may come.
And yesterday, too, in terms of the campaign, he said, what else can we do? So they ran the campaign they thought would lead to victory tonight. It got him this far. Again, it's his first run for elected office, running for the highest office in the state. And to make it to a runoff, that's a big accomplishment, especially for your first run.
And I'm just interested in maybe Clancy or Greg could get a hold of this. How well did Eddie Rispone do in Congressman Abraham's districts where he won during the primary? That's my question here from the Rispone headquarters at the L'Auberge Hotel in Baton Rouge. Back to you in New Orleans.
Thanks so much, Paul. We'll get that answer for you shortly. Now we're following some big races on the North Shore tonight and St. Tammany Parish.
Yeah, voters cast their ballots for their choice of parish president and sheriff. Two huge races there. Megan Key has been following the St. Tammany Parish president's race for us tonight. Megan?
Hey, good afternoon. I am here at Mike Cooper's campaign party, and it is a party to say the least. In fact, one of his family members just got engaged like a few minutes ago, so talk about a celebration and a big win for Mike Cooper. He is now the new St. Tammany Parish president. And Mike, talk to me a little bit, jumping from Covington mayor to St. Tammany Parish president and all the support you've gotten from residents in Covington. How are you feeling right now?
I'm feeling great. As I said earlier,
Well, we will be right back to you. The governor has hit the stage, so I'm going to send it back to the studio.
Okay, that Governor John Bel Edwards taking the stage, greeting his supporters. We're going to get back to Mike Cooper in St. Tammany Parish in just a little bit. Of course, we want to hear from him as well. And Governor Edwards re-elected, according to our projections tonight, the only Democratic governor in the Deep South. So we'll see what he has to say in just a moment.
All right, right now making his way to the stage. Looks like they're going to open with a prayer. Let's go ahead and go live from the Edwards campaign headquarters.
you ready? My brothers and sisters in Christ, let us take a quick break to say a prayer in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Sustain our governor, O Lord, with your mighty hands, so that he'll be strong enough, determined enough to endure all challenges. Sustain our governor, O Lord, be brave enough to face the trials, knowing that you are indeed with him, that he'll be determined and resilient in helping your people, yet humble and gentle at the time of poor acceptance. Sustain our governor, O Lord, whose wishes will not take the place of your desires. A man who will cooperate in assisting your people so that they may sustain their lives. Allow him, Lord, to persevere, to trust in you absolutely and without question. Sustain our governor, O Lord, with a pure heart, a clear and concise conscience, and a soul that mirrors the martyrs that have gone before us. Sustain us, O Lord, with the knowing that all things begin and end with Jesus Christ. A man who will pray often, a man who will pray with God-fearing intention, a man who will pray with direction and passion, mirrored only by our saints. And lastly, Lord, sustain our governor in such a way, and especially tonight. Lord, I ask your blessing also on Mr. Eddie and his wife Linda, their family as well. May our state heal all the partisan differences. And may you and I never forget, it never had anything to do with neither an elephant or a donkey, and everything to do with following the Lamb. Oh Lord, watch over them and guide them, and may your mother and our Savior Jesus Christ forever be upon them. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Father, Son, Holy Spirit, amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, I get to introduce a dear friend. I also get to congratulate you. What you did today was to show that good guys don't always finish last. I get to congratulate you because you re-elected a man that walks with his faith. And every day, in every conversation we have, it's not about what's the politically correct thing to do. The only thing for him is doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with his God. So the proof's in the pudding. He took a $2 billion deficit and created a $500 million surplus. He expanded Medicaid for 460,000 working people in Louisiana. He made sure that Louisiana is not the incarceration capital of the world anymore. But more importantly, he reduced crime at the same time. And I'll just hit two more. He did the biggest investment in early childhood education in recent history. And this last one, which was an historic accomplishment for the legislature, for the governor, but more importantly for the First Lady, we gave teachers their first pay raise in over 10 years. So let me introduce to the people around the country watching, but to remind the people of Louisiana, we elected a friend. We elected a leader. We re-elected a man of God for another 4 years. Congratulations to you, and congratulations to you. Thank you, Cedric. How sweet it is! Thank you. What a great night it is for Louisiana. And to God be the glory. My love for this state deepens with every day that I have the honor to serve as your governor, because every day I get to meet more Louisianans who remind me how blessed we are to call this great state home. The goodness, the decency, the generosity of the people of Louisiana inspire me. Just look around this room. This room looks like the great state of Louisiana. And this is your night even more than it is mine. You didn't just vote for me. You voted for 4 more years of putting Louisiana first. You may have heard me say once or twice that God will order our steps, but we have to move our feet. And you moved your feet to the polls. You picked up phones and you handed out yard signs. You gave your neighbors a ride to the voting precincts. All of you have a reason why this election was important to you. And it may not be the same reason, but it's your collective experiences that make up the story of Louisiana. And by the way, you showed a lot of good sense because you also voted to re-elect my wonderful wife, Donna, as your First Lady. the love of my life since I was in the 7th grade, y'all. She's been my wife for more than 30 years. But over the past 4 years, she has won the hearts of the people of Louisiana. She has worked tirelessly on behalf of Louisiana's children, and I know she's looking forward to continuing that work. I also want to thank my children because they have sacrificed a lot of time with their papa. And I will tell you, my wife and my children had to endure nastiness and silliness that should never be inflicted on anybody. But you know, no matter how busy this job gets, we always find time, me and my family, to be together. And we have shared some pretty special memories over the past few years, whether it's going fishing with John Miller, alligator hunting with Sarah Ellen, or celebrating Samantha's wedding to Jonathan. And we did that a few years ago at the governor's mansion. But you know, I also want to thank my mother and my brothers and my sister. And I want to thank my in-laws as well, Bobby and Helen. Look, I could not have asked for a more supportive family. And the reason they believed in me is because they know the lessons instilled in us by our parents have guided my steps as governor, especially our faith and our belief in social justice. You know, I also want to tell you that I have been blessed with the hardest working, smartest campaign staff that there has ever been. And I want to thank Richard Carbo and all the folks who worked for me. I told them on the very first day that we were not going to be outworked, and we were not outworked. They poured their hearts into this campaign because they knew that turning back on our progress was quite simply not an option. And to my staff in the governor's office and my chief of staff, Mark Cooper, and all the people who work for me, Jay Darden, Matthew Block, and all my cabinet officials, I want to thank all of you for your hard work during our first term, and I want to thank you for the good work. You know, we faced some major challenges that first year in office, from the budget crisis to historic flooding. But together, we proved that there is no challenge that we cannot overcome. And one of the first people to share our vision for a better Louisiana was Linda Day, who led our first campaign for governor. You know, Linda passed away earlier this year after battling cancer. But I know that she is here in spirit tonight, and she is proud of the campaign that we ran. You know, I had an opportunity to speak with Eddie Rispone earlier this evening. And I want you to know I thanked him for putting himself out there for public service. It's a difficult thing for anyone to do. We both agreed that the time for campaigning is over, and now our shared love for Louisiana is always more important than the partisan differences that sometimes divide us. And as for the president, God bless his heart. You know, this administration began with a breeze of hope. Hope that by working together as Louisianans first and foremost, not as Republicans or Democrats, we could make Louisiana the state that we want it to be. And with every step forward, we turned that hope into action, and that is exactly what we're going to continue to do in our second term. You know, during the campaign, you heard me talk a lot about the progress we made. But in the words of the great Louisiana writer Ernest Gaines, who we lost last week, everything has been said, but it needs saying again. We worked together to solve the largest budget deficit in the history of Louisiana. Today, more than 460,000 Louisianans have access to life-saving health care that they didn't have before I became governor. TOPS is fully funded, and we are finally reinvesting in our universities, our community colleges, and our technical colleges. We gave our teachers their first pay raise in a decade. And we made a $20 million down payment on my #1 priority for the second term, and that is early childhood education. We've invested more than $2.8 billion in critical infrastructure improvements to our roads, our bridges, and our ports. And today, we can say that our economy is the biggest it has ever been. Personal income is the highest it has ever been. Unemployment is at a 12-year low. And we've attracted 175 major economic development projects, resulting in new capital investment that exceeds $41.5 billion and resulting in more than 36,000 jobs created. That's what we've been able to do. But as much as we've accomplished, you will agree, and I'm the first to acknowledge, there is much work to be done. Over the next 4 years, we're going to increase workforce training, invest more in education at every level, beginning with early childhood. We're going to improve the health outcomes of Louisianans, and we're going to continue advancing major infrastructure projects. And we will continue to fight for an increase in the minimum wage, because $7.25 is not a meaningful minimum wage. And we're also going to make sure that we pay women what we pay men when they do the same job and have the same qualifications. I know that we can achieve all of this and more because I've seen what we can do when we work together for the good of our state that we call home. If this campaign has taught us anything, it's that the partisan forces in Washington, D.C. are not strong enough to break through the bonds that we share as Louisianans. I have crisscrossed this state from Bastrop to Houma, from Sulphur to St. Joseph. And no matter where I go, whether it's the ballrooms or the union halls, the classrooms, church pews, festivals, or football fields, I am reminded that there is far more that unites us than divides us. You know, we always talk about how unique and beautiful our state is. Case in point, we tailgate and we vote on the same day. And we had universities score 3 big wins in the great state of Mississippi today. Most importantly, we all scored a big victory in the great state of Louisiana today. You know, here in Louisiana, we march to the beat of our own second line. We are rich in culture, natural resources, and diversity. It's what makes our great state. And tonight, the people of Louisiana have chosen to chart their own path. You know, I have never been more hopeful that Louisiana's best days are ahead because we've proven what we can do when we put people over politics. Don and I are incredibly humbled by the trust you placed in us. I told you 4 years ago, I would not let you down. For the next 4 years, I promise to work just as hard for you. And from the very bottom of my heart, thank you. I love you. Now let's get back to work together for the great state of Louisiana. Thank you. Thank you, Mom.
All right, you have been listening to Governor John Bel Edwards deliver his victory speech, and as you were listening to him, his opponent, Rispone, whom he never mentioned by name in his speech, was delivering his concession speech. We're going to bring that to you in a moment, but first, Ron, let me get your thoughts on his victory speech.
Well, I thought it was a good speech. It had energy and enthusiasm that you would expect. You know, this is the closest governor's race we've had since 1979 when Dade Treen beat Lewis Lambert. So, this is a tight race, and
that one was closer than this one.
That's right, yeah, and we have a situation here where if Rispone really started off the runoff with the momentum, and I don't think he wore well. But when you look at the actual results, John Bel Edwards won with African American votes and African American turnout. The 51% that the Republicans got combined in the primary fell to 49% in the runoff, and that was largely due to increased African American turnout.
And you saw there Mayor LaToya Cantrell on the stage with him as he gave that
But I'll tell you what,
speech.
remember what Greg Rigemer was telling us earlier tonight, that Edwards was polling north of 52, close to 53%. I think Donald Trump brought this closer. He just couldn't get Rispone over the top because he turned out a lot of African American voters and white Democrats as well. Trump is a double-edged sword everywhere he goes. He turns out his own base, of course, but he also turns out people who are against him. And I don't want to take anything away from the turnout efforts that were already underway in the black community with dozens, literally dozens of civic and religious and political organizations working at the street level, at the precinct and parish levels to get African American vote up way above where it was in the primary, because it was low in the primary. And Edwards asked them to answer the bell, and they did. But he also got a significant share of white vote. Look at the 60% vote that he got in Jefferson Parish in the early votes, the 41% early vote that he got in St. Tammany. Now that all those votes are coming in, he's still getting a very significant vote in those Republican strongholds. So he did what he had to do. He had to get a big black turnout, big African American turnout, and he got 98 to 99% of that vote, and he got about 30 to 31% of the white vote,
Since
which is
this
what he
race
needed.
was nationalized, let's take a look at it from a national perspective. You had Kentucky, now you have Louisiana. What is this signal for the president?
Well, it's a defeat for the president. I don't know that he could be blamed for it. As we talked earlier, it was really more about state issues and state personalities, even though Trump did have a role in it. But from the standpoint of, to the extent that it's victory for Democrats, that victory is pretty limited. How many national Democrats are pro-life and pro-gun rights the way John Bel Edwards is?
A very good point. Now let's listen to the concession speech of Eddie Rispone.
Thank y'all so much. Did Father say it best? He did. Now you know why he's here. We have nothing to be ashamed of. We had over 700,000 people in Louisiana really want something better and something different. Many of y'all work very, very hard, and I appreciate that. It's very humbling to know that we have that many people really want something better. You put a lot of your treasure in this, you put a lot of your time and your heart, and you were doing it for the right reasons. And we're going to continue to do that. We're going to work in this state. We're going to make sure that we do one day make this the best state that can possibly be, not be last. And we're going to continue to do that. God has blessed this state. We know it. We have such an incredible state here, such blessings that God has given us, and we got to continue to work to try to make it what it should be. I say that. Thank you. I am disappointed. I'm being very honest, but I want to tell you, I'm grateful to Linda. She has been incredible. 13 months I've drug her all over this state, and she's never complained. It's amazing. Could not have done it without her. There's no question about that. And I have this amazing family behind me. They've supported me. It's the foundation of life, Lord. It is truly. To grow up with a beautiful family, a loving family that taught us about Christ, taught us about work and responsibility, also taught us to be grateful for the blessings we've received from God. And so there's no regrets there. When you try to serve Him, you do the best you can. And that's what we've done. We've worked very hard. You work very hard. And I'm grateful for your friendship. I'm grateful that you love this state and you want to see it do better. Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause, please. I was being interviewed by Fox a couple of days ago, and the gentleman that was interviewing me, it was Thursday morning before President Trump came. By the way, can we give President Trump a round of applause? That man loves America and he loves Louisiana. He came down here 3 times specifically to try to help us. Please give him another round of applause. This gentleman was interviewing me, and he says, Mr. Rispone, he says, I got to ask you a question. I said, what's that, sir? He said, well, what happens if you don't win? What is it going to be like to go back to the life you had before? I said, hey, I'll tell you, fella, I had a pretty good life. Between us, we got 7 extraordinary married children. And you know what's coming next? 24 perfect grandchildren. And he looked at me and said, what are you doing running for governor? But truly, you know, I am so blessed for your friendship and your support. You obviously know I'm very blessed with an incredible family. God has continued to bless us. And we're going to continue to work for this state so every child would have an opportunity to receive an education, an opportunity to have hope, an opportunity to know Christ. God bless you, and thank you so much for being here.
Eddie Rispone with a very gracious speech thanking his supporters and President Trump before making his concession. Before we go to break, though, we want to acknowledge something that you probably saw unfold on the stage at the Edwards camp. An older woman seemed to have some sort of a health scare. We understand that that was Donna Edwards' mother, and according to Sheba Turk, who was there at that camp, she suffered from some sort of overheating situation. So we'll continue to monitor that, but we just want to let you know that's what we found out so far. We'll be right back.